You're listening to The Score, a podcast for Valley sports enthusiasts.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Score podcast for this month. And we're happy to be joined by Dan Hiner, the sports editor of the Tribune, Chronicle, and Vindicator. Dan, thanks for joining us tonight. It's been a journey for you, hasn't it?
Oh, I know you say it's the fastest 10 weeks, but it feels like I run a marathon.
But being the sports editor, you're a young guy. You were actually in this building 10 years ago as a sports intern, and you have blossomed into a sports editor. Just tell us about your journey a little bit.
I started off, like you said, started off as an intern. I was a journalism student at YSU. Started as an intern here in 2015 for the fall football season. Eventually, I went and started freelancing for the Vindicator. I became full-time at the Vindicator, worked there until it closed in 2019. After that, I had a brief stint as a news reporter, as a business reporter. Then I worked in Ashtabula on the sports desk. Then I became the sports editor in Sharon. And then last year, just prior to football season, came back to Youngstown to work for the Vindicator.
Writing's a passion of yours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've always say I have more of a personality of a writer and, a face to stay off camera, but here I am.
Writing and for newspapers, I mean, you have the hard copy and then you have the website edition. Mm-hmm. Is there more or less on one or the other? Or is it pretty equal?
Recently, there's been a little bit more of a push for the website. Just because of printing restrictions that we've had at the paper.
Sure.
So if like this past football Friday, we had to move the deadline up because of an issue with the press. So we had to fall back on the website a little bit more than we have. But ideally, we would like to keep it an even 50-50.
And obviously, with those situations that are out of your control, you could always go to the website to get those updates, correct?
Yes, yeah. And if there's any situation where we weren't able to get something in completely, we always try our best to leave a note, somewhere, whether it's in the story or we put a little graphic that will say, like, please go back to the website for a complete game story, for, anything that really pops up.
When you first started, how have things changed?
I don't think that it really has changed too much, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, there was obviously more of a focus on the print side of it,
sure,
but I think that there's always been that digital element that we've always kind of focused on and tried to, integrate in various ways. I think, if anything, what we've actually seen is a little bit more of a better meshing between the two. Mm-hmm. So a lot of stuff that you can actually get on the website traditionally, there's some type of tech integration between the paper, the physical paper, and the website itself.
If people want to get stuff into the paper, have story ideas, they can just call, email, that sort of thing?
So I always say it's better to email me, right? Because, that way, because
you have it.
That way I have it, and also it's just, you never know where I'm going to be from, at one point or another. So, but yeah, if you go and you send an email, usually I'll try my best to get back to you, as long as it's a...
Well, we're done with the business part of it. Let's talk a little football, because we have 7 teams entering week number 3 of the playoffs. First of all, let's talk about 9 teams had a bye in the first round. Did you like the bye? I think 7 of those 9 actually won in week 2.
You know what? I like the idea of it because it really gives a team the ability to kind of reassess or potentially rest. So you look at a team like Fitch, right? You have a human battering ram like DeAndre Richard. Well, he was limited in what he was able to do a little bit sometimes in this season. So imagine giving him a week off, those little things. If you're a team like McDonald, you run the wing team, very power heavy, it gives them a chance. What we did is we actually talked to some of the coaches just to get their thoughts. And, it was a little bit, because it's first year, a little bit of a mixed bag. Sure. They weren't really sure how they were going to react to it, because you're hoping that these 16, 17, 18-year-old kids are going to be able to carry it over. But overall, it looks like it was a pretty good success.
And from a coverage standpoint, we actually had less games in week 1 of the playoffs than more games in week 2, and it usually is reversed for the first couple of weeks. Let's talk about a couple of games. Obviously, everyone's focused on Poland and Girard, a rematch from 4 weeks ago when Girard nipped them 29-28. Both teams scored a touchdown in each quarter. Poland's quarterback, Zipolita, got hurt, so didn't play in the second half. What do you expect Friday?
I think you're going to come. I think Girard. If we were still doing pick'ems, sure, right? I would say that probably Girard is the favorite, just because I think that when you have a team, I don't think people realize how young Gerard is. So every game that you play is a learning experience, right? Their leading receiver's a freshman, their quarterback's a sophomore. Get them more experience and let them see what it's like in those closer games. And I think that they can build and get a little bit more separation this time around.
Sure. Moody and Garrettsfield, Garfield, I mean, what a year for Cardinal Moody. Here was a team that, made the playoffs but didn't succeed really in the regular season, were able to get in and, has a good opportunity against Garfield.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up last year, Moody always schedules up, right? They always have a bunch of D2, D3, D4 teams. And that got them into the playoff last year, but they weren't able to do anything. This year, they only played 2 teams with a losing record with a very similar schedule, and with even some, schools like Canfield and South Range for some local flavor. I think Moody is going to be the favorite. I think that I've talked to a couple people, they think it's going to be like some runaway.
Sure.
I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be a pretty decent game, but I do think Moody is going to be favored just because it seems like Colaprete's kind of tapped into some of that talent that they really weren't able to tap into in previous years.
McDonald and Monroeville, don't know much about Monroeville, but McDonald, perfect season so far, and I think surprised some people. Not only did they beat JFK, but they beat them pretty soundly.
I mean, McDonald's really good. I mean, Kyle.
Or JFK, I'm sorry.
Yeah. When you look at both JFK and McDonald, they were 2 completely different teams kind of getting to that point. JFK had some turmoil. They had to make some changes at various positions, and they rode a really hot 6-game winning streak into the playoff. McDonald, on the flip side, they would just been rolling the entire time, led by Drew Zajac and Kyle Puckett.
Sure.
And I think Puckett was really the difference maker because he's somebody who can open up that wing T style offense.
Sure. 3 other teams. Austintown Fitch takes on a very good Jesuit team. West Branch takes on Perry, and Canfield hosts Villa Angeles St. Joe. Now, Villa Angeles St. Joe and Cardinal Moody played earlier in the season. That was week 2. But I think this Villa Angeles St. Joe team is completely different than where they were in week 2. So out of the 7, I think 3 can move on. I know we're going to have 1 at least.
Yes, we're going to be guaranteed that, but it will be, I think, pretty fascinating to see how it works. I think we'll get a couple more.
Sure.
But again, if we were to kind of go with our gut, but I do think that there's going to be some setup for, I think, a couple of teams that are going to play pretty well that we probably didn't expect them to against, some of these out-of-town schools.
Sure. After the season, there's postseason awards, and I know you're part of the Sports Writers Association that come up with these awards. Northeast Inland will be coming out, and then the state later in December. How were these awards decided on, and how does a player kind of get this honor?
So, it's a group of representatives from the various papers in Northeast Ohio. So everywhere from Akron to Medina, obviously me, Ron Firth down in Columbiana. We all kind of have a meeting. We just had it this week where we go and we take stats, nominations, whatever, and then we kind of slot them in at various points, right? Maybe a first team, Division IV. For a quarterback.
Now, is there a vote taken on this, or is there discussion?
So yeah, it comes down to discussion, and there is some debate back and forth. Especially if we have a loaded group. So for example, this year Division II offensive line was just hectic. We're starting to go through and we're piecing together. Okay, well this guy's on a winning team. He's the best lineman. Okay, well he got this award last year. Well, so did this guy. Okay, well, let's break it down into, talent level and, where's this guy potentially going to school? Well, this guy's going to the MAC. Well, this guy has MAC offers as well. And then all of a sudden you have like 8 guys and now you're trying to whittle it down. So there is discussion back and forth to try to figure out the best guys possible. And sometimes when you get parents or coaches, they might not understand yeah, we really wanted to get your guy here. But once you kind of take everything into a macro, it becomes very much a process.
Is it difficult because guys are voting on players they've never seen probably play in person or at least on a consistent basis?
That does play a part, right? Like I'm not going to know anybody from Medina Highland, but I still have to kind of take everything in. When we have those discussions, what I usually do is if I put somebody up, I'll make the best argument that I can, and then I'll let the rest of the room kind of figure it out. You know, I kind of take myself out of it if that's the case, just so I'm not an impartial guy. I just lay it out there and let everybody kind of figure it out.
Do coaches nominate? Do they send you that information? Do you know, I mean, you probably know who some of the players are, but when you get into linemen, I'm sure that's kind of difficult.
Yeah, so what we try to do is, because we do see a lot of these kids, we always say, give us the stats and we'll kind of figure everything out. If you really feel soundly on a kid, we'll obviously take a nomination.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to offensive line, because that all comes down to system and what the coach is doing. But take, for example, A.J. Pearson over at Girard. Well,
numbers speak for itself.
Numbers speak for itself.
Sure.
You know, so I don't need the nomination on that one. So like there is a little bit of a mix.
Okay.
We do take nominations into account. We do take the stats into account, and sometimes we do kind of look at situations like, for example, tight end. You know, there are teams that might put their tight end up, but there's no actual tight end on that group.
Sure. So it doesn't hurt if coaches would nominate then. It kind of gives you something to work with.
It definitely helps.
I mean, there's no guarantees, but it does help.
That's what I always tell people.
Sure.
There's no guarantee.
So we'll have the Northeast Inland come out, and then the state comes out. And how does the state handle? That's still through the Sports Writers Association.
That is through the Sports Writers Association. So it's a kind of a pyramid, right? So we start off very broad when it comes to the district, and then each district has kind of one representative that leads that meeting.
Okay.
So for the inland, it's actually the Canton Repository.
Okay.
So they lead that group, and then once we get to the all-state level, we, as the local guys on the ground that figured out the all-district, we make our recommendations for all-state, and then for us, Canton then takes our recommendations and then makes our pitch for the all-state guys. So that's how it kind of funnels its way up.
And kind of what I've seen over the years is if you're a Northeast Inland or a district player of the year, then more than likely you're going to be a first team or all-state.
Yes, yeah, that definitely helps. So we have to actually make more, when it comes to all-state, more of an in-depth argument. You know, we can kind of let the stats or whatever speak for themselves with all district, but we have to really dive deep for some of the all-state guys. So once we get that list finalized, I usually have to go back to the coaches and say, give me whatever past history they have. Maybe they were a 2-time all-state guy, or maybe they're a 3-time all-league guy in the Northeast State, which is a very well-respected league, and that plays a part in their arguments for Canton.
So that stuff has changed over the years.
A little bit. There's a little bit of change that's happened with some of that. You know, it used to be the AP used to pick that. I want to say about like 7 or 8 years ago, they kind of worked away from that model. So it's fallen more on the responsibilities of the local representatives.
What about Mr. Football? Same process?
So what we do is, usually if we have a guy, we'll actually list on our all district process. We'll say, okay, you know, we feel this guy is an all Mr. Football candidate. And eventually, if there's multiple, we try to whittle it down to one.
Per district?
Per district.
Okay.
And then that usually gets finalized, you know, through the whole state voting process.
Sure. What I like about the Mr. Football is they do list who was in contention. They do list who the finalists were, and I think that's really, really good, especially for underclassmen, because it gives them that opportunity to work forward. We're going to stay on the high school level. Dan, let's talk about NIL. A vote's coming up in a couple of weeks where principals are going to vote for or against NIL based on a lawsuit that was filed. I thought I would never say this, but I hope it passes for an obvious reason. Then the Ohio High School Athletic Association, its membership, will have some teeth into what the actual bylaw is. If not, then it becomes the wild, wild west.
Well, that's what we found out with the NCAA, right?
Sure.
Like, if it has to go to the court or it has to go to any type of legislative body, well, they're obviously going to side with the individual.
Sure.
And, you know, not saying that you shouldn't in those situations, but when that happens, usually it becomes a free market system. And that's what we have in college. And you're right. If we are able to kind of, it passes, then the OHSA could at least find something that all of the schools can unanimously agree upon, because that's how a lot of the voting process is for these OHSA bylaws. They're voted on by the schools. So if you're able to do that, then you can end up kind of finding a system that's probably good for a middle ground for everybody.
It was funny, Dan. I think in 2022 it came up for a vote and soundly was defeated. And Ohio is one of 5 states nationwide that does not have NIL. Are you surprised that it came to this kind of structure, pending on a lawsuit that it would come up for an emergency vote?
To a certain degree, like I thought it would have gotten taken care of a little bit earlier. I think the big kind of boogeyman for a lot of things that happen in high school sports is, as you would expect, kind of the differences between school sizes and also the differences between public and private. Obviously, if you're a school like Fitch, you're going to have more resources than a school like Mineral Ridge. So could there be a situation where if you just agreed to a system and didn't have everything in place, those could play a part? Akron-Hoban, is a very well-off, private school. Who knows what they'd be able to do with the finances? But if they're going to a vote now, I think it's probably the best case scenario because it's giving people time to think and potentially come up with any potential loopholes.
Do you think it will pass?
I think it will.
Yeah.
Because I do think that there is going to be a point where everyone kind of reads the room and they go, okay, this is going to happen one way or another. We either need to do it now or it
and have control over it or let it, and I think that's the case, and unfortunately, my personal opinion is it's unfortunate it's come to that. I never thought I would see in my lifetime, high school athletes having an NIL deal, let alone college, which is a completely different story.
Well, I mean, it's even changed from the perspective when I was in school and the big debate was always transfers, right?
Yep.
Like now it's not an issue if you see guys transfer.
Sure.
When you go back 10, 15 years ago, that was a big conversation topic.
Well, and the competitive balance was supposed to kind of even that.
Yeah.
And I think it has somewhat simmered, but again, we'll see how this next phase comes up with NIL and whether. And again, I credit the Ohio High School Athletic Association because when they sent out that it was an emergency vote to all the schools, they also included their bylaws when it comes to transfers. So that vote will take place starting Monday, November 17th, and will last for a couple of days, and we'll see how that turns out. Dan, the big story, obviously, locally, was Ursuline. It came out this week. There was more alleged victims and so on and so forth. You know the story. I guess the big question is, will Ursuline have football in 2026?
That's going to be a question. And, we know of a candidate that Ursuline, has kind of talked to and just kind of, okay, read the room for us kind of a situation. What do you think? And they were like, you guys really have to kind of do a really good PR campaign, right? And that's going to be an issue because
with so many students, we've heard as many as 200, and not all football players, but a multitude of different athletes. And again, I don't know if that number is correct or not, but that's a number that I've heard. I'm sure some of the underclassmen have moved on if there is a program. And again, they still have their coach. I mean, no, everyone is still in, from what we understand, still has their jobs, when it comes to coaching. But can they be competitive? And how much will this hamper them down the road?
It's going to be tough, right? Because if it was a public school, you can always settle on, okay, if things go south, then we always have the possibility that we're still internal, right? When you're a private school, it is a process. You're trying to recruit kids. You're trying to recruit people's families in. How do you look them in the eye during this process if you're going to some of the private schools, some of the, like a Holy Family in Poland or a St. Charles or whatever, and say, you could trust us. Like that is going to be a big issue for them, I think, that we haven't really talked too much about.
And obviously football has to be on the back burner because of all the other issues going on. Again, very unfortunate situation. It has dominated our coverage as well as your coverage in the paper as well. And it's an unfortunate situation, but it's one of those things. And I don't know, how they're going to, this reminds me a little bit of, and not comparing this, but in 1995, and you're too young to remember, Struthers didn't have football because a levee failed. And 30 years later, they're still feeling the impacts of that. And I think this is going to be felt by the Ursuline community, Ursuline High School and its football program, and just its school for many, many, many years to come.
There's going to need to be there's going to need to be a time where, and maybe, like you said, Dan Reardon's still the coach. They haven't made any changes there. But there's going to have to be somebody at some point that is able to stand up front, that the community can say, okay, you know what? We feel like we're back on track, just from an internal perspective.
Well, it's just a reputation. I mean, they're known statewide. This story is a national story, and it's going to take a lot to kind of get them back to where they were, in my opinion. And again, football's probably at the back end of that. The Ohio High School Athletic Association really has no timetable for Ursuline to declare we're going to have football in 2026 or we're not. There's no deadline for that, so we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Well, that's also the other part to it, right? Like, we're now, the OHSAA doesn't have a deadline, and the federal courts are not beholden to football. So they can kind of do whatever.
But like some of these opponents who have contracts have to be kind of wondering the same thing. Everyone's wondering is, hey, are you going to have a team next year, or do I got to find another game?
Yeah, if I was to be a betting man, I would say that they are going to have a team. I think they'll have something. Are they going to be to the level that we were expecting this year? No. But I do think there will be some level of competition, especially if there is a genuine belief that there have been steps that have been taken to properly address the situation.
Yeah, it's a very tough situation. Someone mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago, maybe a JV program just to kind of keep football alive, maybe even 8-man if that's the case, but we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Dan, Youngstown State, Doug Phillips, 6-4, 3-3. If they win their next two against Indiana State, Northern Iowa, that gives them 8 wins, which seems to be the magic number. Your impressions of this team?
Tremendous offense. Defense has some things they need to work on. Credit where credit's due. Bo Brungard has really taken his game to another level. He's been able to just completely take over that offense and show good understanding of it. And that has allowed them to be able to play kind of old school Big 12 football a little bit, right? You remember those games where you get Texas and Oklahoma and it'd be 52-48. Well, the defense is doing a little bit better job, on that end, but I think the limiting factor is going to be defensively for that group. It's been a step forward overall for the program, and they should be able to compete for a playoff spot because they should be favored in these next 2 games. But you've got to kind of just tighten up a little bit on that defensive side, especially because they also have a really good they're also pretty good at special teams wise. They got one of the best kicker-punter combos, I think, in the FCS. Yes. So just kind of tighten up a little bit.
You mentioned Bo Brungard, and the Walter Payton Award goes to the most valuable player in all of FCS. I asked Coach Phillips earlier if he thought Brungard was a candidate for that, and Coach says, look at his numbers. Okay, his numbers speak for itself, but look at the competition he's doing it against. He's not doing it against some lesser teams. I mean, he's doing it against what a lot of people say is the best FCS conference in the country. Does he have those? Is he, in your opinion, legitimate contender?
Taking any type of local bias out of it, I do think that from an objective standpoint, he should be the front runner, I think. Now, if YSU makes the playoffs, that definitely boosts that argument significantly. With them kind of teetering, or if they were to drop, the next 2 or something like that, it would definitely hurt a little bit. But if they make the playoffs with his numbers against the likes of a North Dakota State, that level of competition is significantly different than if he was playing Robert Morris. So there is a lot of respect for what YSU is doing and what Bo is doing on a conference level. And I think that he does have a legitimate chance. It's just going to be a matter of taking care of business to get you to the postseason, because that's another thing that he could add to the resume.
Indiana State on Saturday. Penguins are 25-8 against them. Northern Iowa at the Dome. YSU has struggled against Northern Iowa. They're 10-26. Their last win in the Dome was in 1999. They beat them 29-20. So they're nothing against the other programs. I mean, these are 2 winnable games.
They are 2 winnable games, right? Indiana State, you should be able to win. But funny things always happen when you go to Iowa. Fun little anecdote. The first YSU game I ever went, my dad took me. We lived on the west side, and we drove down Mahoning Avenue. And I asked my dad, I was like, why are we going to watch a team from Iowa? And he's like, because wild things always happen whenever they play. He's like, it's never a normal game. So you kind of have that in the back of your head a little bit. Just who knows what can happen when you go in there. But realistically, they should be able to win those 2. And it will be, I think, especially Iowa, is going to be a lot on Bo to just create a little bit of breathing room early so that you can kind of wash away a little bit of those demons.
You know, the opponents know what he's going to do. He's just doing it. I mean, they can't stop him. I mean, it's as simple as that. What's your grade for Doug Phillips this year? They're sitting at 6-4, 3-3.
I mean, I would give him like if I was to put him on like an elementary grading scale, I'd say probably like a B- right now.
Yeah.
Like there's some games that I think that, they could have probably ended up turning a little bit. It probably could have went from like a B- to like an A- if they ended up winning that North Dakota State game.
Well, in the South Dakota State game, they were in position as well and couldn't hold on to it. But yeah, I would agree with that. I think he's done a good job. And I think the most impressive thing about Coach Phillips, and people look at wins and losses, but if you look at this roster, compare it to last year's roster, it's basically the same. Except for graduation, no one left in the portal. That says a lot, especially in this day and age.
It really does, because usually there's always some leakage somewhere. We see it with the YSU men's basketball program, right? Season ends and it's like, okay, we're going to lose a few guys here to graduation that were graduate students. We're going to lose a few guys here to the portal. And now we kind of got to rebuild a little bit. The football team's done a good job kind of keeping that camaraderie and keeping that design. The big difference really is the change at offensive coordinator, I think. Yeah. So there is a level of respect that you do need to give Phillips for making the right call with the offensive coordinator, because that's really what I think opened up this offense significantly, because the coaching staff in Bo seem to now be kind of seeing everything through the same eyes.
And it doesn't hurt that Mike Ursich's wife is from the area, so
I know, right?
that helps. When you look into your crystal ball, Dan, as we wrap things up, do we have a high school team that gets to the finals first? And can YSU, if they get in, can they make a deep run?
So I think there are a couple teams who can make a run at state. I think that as long as Fitch kind of stays focused and they don't have a situation like they had last week, went down 17-7, right. If they kind of keep that in the back of their mind of like, we could play with anybody.
Well, Division II, Region 5, anybody that comes out of there, has a legitimate shot, because I think it's the best region in the state.
Yeah, but Fitch, they obviously have some past history with Walsh. So I want to see how Friday is. Do they kind of come in really focused? Because when Fitch is focused, they're really good.
And then they would have Hoban on the doorstep.
That would be another, which is going to be another tough one.
And that's what I mean. So this is a very, very difficult region.
Yeah, and I think whoever gets out of D5. Whoever gets out of the region in D5, because you got Mooney, you got Poland, you got Gerard. It's going to be that we always kind of knew at the start of the season, like, this is going to be tough. It wasn't until about like week 5 we realized, like, oh, this is going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Whoever ends up making it out is going to be, the favorite. I will also say, I think if Canfield, keep your eye on them. If they can, I like Enzo Coca. I don't think he's a guy you necessarily want back there throwing 20 times a game. So if they can kind of keep games close and just rely on what they've done well pretty much for the last 20 years, they can make a run too. They have a pretty good defense, and then Coca with also obviously a running game.
Yeah, I took a beating from Canfield. I predicted them to go 4-6 at the start of the season. And I really think the West Branch victory really propelled them because of the way they won. They had 2 special team returns in that game. And the way they won that football game, I just think propelled them.
It was huge, right? Like, you get to win that early in the season. That helps reset your goals. Yeah. If they would have beat Western Reserve or something like that, right down the street, they probably would have been like, okay, not knocking Western Reserve, but a D3 school against a D7 school, you would expect.
And West Branch is still playing.
And West Branch is still playing. And so you can always look across into D4 and go, we beat a team that's still alive.
Sure. YSU, real quick, Dan, what do you think?
I think they win the next 2. I think they make the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if they even pull off a playoff win. It would kind of depend on how the bracket kind of plays itself out. Yeah. So, we would have to see how the bracket plays itself out. But I think they win the next 2. I think they win this week pretty easily, and I think it's next week at Northern Iowa. It's going to be kind of tight.
All right. My guest today, Dan Hiner, the sports editor of the Tribune, Chronicle, and Vindicator. and he joins us on The Score. We appreciate your time, Dan, and this podcast, along with all of our other podcasts here at the station, will be available every Thursday morning, and you can watch this podcast wherever you watch for podcasts and listen to podcasts. That will do it. Have a good day.